The old man won't be a problem. He's too in love with the idea of Connor finally settling down. I could rob him blind, and he'd thank me for it. That's what I heard my son's fiancée say to her sister in the kitchen of my own home the night I threw a dinner party to welcome her into our family. They were laughing, actually laughing, like the whole thing was some private joke between the two of them. I stood in the hallway with a bottle of wine I'd gone to fetch, and I didn't move for a full 30 seconds. If you're watching this, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, because I want you to hear every single word of what I did next. My name is Robert Calloway. I'm 63 years old, and for the past 22 years, I've run Calloway Home and Hardware out of Harlan County, Kentucky. My grandfather started the business as a feed store in 1951. My father expanded it into hardware and lumber. I turned it into 4 locations and a wholesale distribution operation that covers most of eastern Kentucky and southern West Virginia. It isn't glamorous. It's not tech money or Wall Street money, but it's real, and it's mine. And I built it with my hands and my back and more sleepless nights than I can count. My wife Carol passed away 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She was gone in 4 months from the diagnosis. Our son, Connor, was 27 at the time, and losing his mother broke something in him that took years to start healing. He withdrew, buried himself in work, kept to himself. I worried about him constantly. When he finally started dating again, I was relieved. When he told me 2 years ago that he'd met someone special, I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. Her name was Natalie Foss. She was 31, originally from Nashville, working remotely as a marketing consultant. She was beautiful in that polished, deliberate way, always put together, always saying the right thing at the right moment. Connor was completely transformed around her. He smiled again. He laughed. He called me more often. Whatever she was doing for him, I was grateful. I invited them to dinner regularly. I asked her questions about her work, her family, her ambitions. I tried to learn who she was. She was warm with me in those moments, attentive, calling me Mr. Calloway with a little smile like it was an inside joke. I thought she was genuine. I was wrong. The engagement happened last March. Connor called me on a Sunday morning, his voice cracking with happiness, and told me he'd proposed the night before on a hiking trail up near Pine Mountain. She'd said yes. I congratulated them both and told Connor I'd host a proper dinner to celebrate, something small and intimate with family. It was a Saturday evening in early April. I cooked myself, the way I always do for important occasions. Carol's pot roast recipe, homemade rolls, the good bourbon from the back cabinet. Natalie brought her younger sister Jess, a quiet woman in her late 20s who watched everything with careful eyes. Connor was glowing. I spent most of the evening watching my son and feeling something close to peace. After dinner, Connor and I moved to the back porch to talk. I excused myself after a while to grab another bottle from the kitchen, and that's when I heard them. Natalie and Jess were at the kitchen table. The door was mostly closed but not latched, and their voices carried easily through the old farmhouse walls. "So what's the actual number?" Jess was asking. "Conservatively?" Natalie's voice was calm, almost bored. 4 locations. The warehouse operation, the property the original store sits on in town. If he structured it the way Connor described, we're talking close to $3 million in assets. Maybe more. And Connor doesn't suspect anything? She laughed softly. Connor just wants someone to love him. He's not complicated. The hard part is the father. Robert is sharper than he looks. I can feel him watching me sometimes. So what do you do? I keep being exactly who I've been. Warm, attentive, daughter-in-law material. The old man won't be a problem. He's too in love with the idea of Connor finally settling down. I could rob him blind, and he'd thank me for it. More laughter. The sound of glasses being moved. Once we're married and I'm on the legal documents for the business, it's a different conversation. Connor trusts me completely with finances. He basically told me his dad would eventually hand over operational control. We're talking a year, maybe 18 months. Then we assess our options. I stood in that hallway and didn't breathe. The bottle of bourbon hung at my side. I thought about Carol. About the 31 years we spent building something worth leaving behind. I thought about Connor's face at dinner. Open and trusting and so happy. I put the bourbon on the side table and walked back out to the porch without it. Nobody noticed. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my study with the lights off and thought through everything I'd heard, testing it against what I knew of Natalie, looking for the moments I'd missed or explained away. They were there. The way she'd steered certain conversations toward the business. The questions she asked about the partnership structure, which I'd taken as genuine interest. The way she'd encouraged Connor to talk to me about updating the business documents to add a family trust for future planning. I'm not a man who acts on emotion. I never have been. Carol used to say I was the most stubborn, methodical person she'd ever met, and she meant it as a complaint. But in situations like this, it becomes an advantage. I didn't want to storm into that room and accuse anyone. I didn't want to blow up my son's happiness based on one overheard conversation. No matter how damning, I needed to know who Natalie Voss really was. I called my attorney on Monday morning. Patricia Oakes had handled Calloway Home Hardware's legal affairs for 15 years, and before that she'd spent a decade as a federal prosecutor. She was not a woman who scared easily or moved slowly. I need a background investigation, I told her. Thorough. And I need to know whether anything I'm considering doing legally constitutes entrapment. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Tell me what you heard. I told her everything. When I finished, she said, Robert, what you're describing is a woman in the planning stage of what could become wire fraud, financial fraud, and possibly elder financial abuse under Kentucky statute, depending on how she executes it, none of which has happened yet, legally speaking. But if you want to get ahead of this, we need to start now. Then let's start now. She referred me to an investigator named Dale Pruitt, former state police, now private. Dale was 55, quiet, and had the particular kind of stillness that comes from years of watching people who don't know they're being watched. We met at a diner on Route 119, and I laid out what I needed. What's her background? I asked. Nashville, marketing, supposedly self-employed. Give me 10 days, he said. The next week was one of the hardest of my life. I had dinner with Connor twice. Watched him talk about wedding venues and honeymoon ideas, watched Natalie smile and squeeze his hand. I kept my expression neutral and interested and warm. Inside, I was calculating. On day 4, Dale called. Her name's actually Natalie Voss. That part checks out. But the marketing consultant business is a shell. She has one listed client, a cousin's landscaping company. Her income before Connor was mostly from a man named Gerald Hartwell in Brentwood, Tennessee. 68 years old, retired pharmaceutical executive. They dated for just over a year. He told friends she'd helped him with financial planning. Dale paused. He's currently in litigation with her over $180,000 that moved from his accounts to an LLC she incorporated 3 months into their relationship. My hand tightened on the phone. Does the litigation resolve anything? His attorneys say it's complicated. She structured the transfers as, quote, investments in a joint venture. Hard to prove fraud when there's paperwork. He settled partially. She walked away with about $90,000 and no criminal charges. Is there anyone else? Still looking. But Robert, there's something else. She's got a man in Nashville. Name's Derek Crane, 34 years old. Bartender. They've been in contact throughout her relationship with your son. Texts. Calls. They met in person. Twice in the last 3 months. On weekends, she told Connor she was visiting a college friend. I closed my eyes. Gerald Hartwell. Derek Crane. My son Connor. I knew exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. On day 9, Dale sent me a full report. The Gerald Hartwell situation was documented. There were text messages between Natalie and Derek Crane that Dale had obtained through means I didn't ask him to explain, in which she referred to Connor as the hardware heir, and outlined a general timeline for making the move after they were legally married. In one exchange, Derek had asked how much longer he had to wait, and Natalie had written back, "Be patient. His dad is the real asset. We get access to the business through Connor. Then we're done waiting." I read that message 3 times. I called Patricia. "I have what I need," I said. Now let's talk about the trap. Patricia was cautious. She spent 40 minutes on the phone explaining what we could do legally versus what we could not, where the line was between setting up an opportunity for someone to reveal criminal intent versus actually manufacturing a crime. What we settled on was elegant in its simplicity. I was going to offer Natalie exactly what she wanted, and I was going to watch her reach for it. Patricia drafted a document, a proposed amendment to the Calloway Home and Hardware Partnership Agreement, bringing in a new family member as an operational partner with signing authority and access to the business accounts. Legitimate on its face, the kind of thing a father might genuinely do to welcome a daughter-in-law. The document included a signature line for Connor, a signature line for me, and a signature line for Natalie as the incoming partner. It also, buried in the language, included a clause that would allow the new partner to initiate transfers from the operating accounts with only one signature during a 6-month transition period. Patricia told me flat out, "This is a consent test. If she signs this without flagging that clause and then initiates a transfer, she's committed fraud on paper. If she doesn't sign it or asks Connor to remove the clause, you learn something different about her." I said, "She'll sign it." I arranged a Sunday afternoon visit. Just family, I told Connor. Lunch, a walk around the property, and I wanted to talk to them about the future. Connor was touched. Natalie wore a cream-colored blouse and smiled warmly when I greeted her at the door. Over lunch, I talked about legacy, about what Calloway Home and Hardware meant to our family and how I wanted to make sure it was protected and continued. I told them that with the wedding coming, it felt like the right time to formalize things. I slid the document across the table. "I'd like Natalie to be part of the business," I said. Officially. Connor looked genuinely moved. "Dad, are you serious?" "I've never been more serious." I looked at Natalie. "You're going to be family. This business is family." She read through the document. I watched her eyes move across the page with a precision that had nothing to do with sentiment. She didn't read it the way someone overwhelmed by generosity reads something. She read it the way someone who knows exactly what they're looking for reads something. When she got to page 3, she paused for just a fraction of a second. Then she smiled at me. "Robert, this is so meaningful. Thank you. Take it home. Look it over," I said. "There's no rush." She took it home. She signed it and sent it back within 48 hours. The Monday after she returned the document, I called Patricia. Patricia called the Harlan County prosecutor's office. And then Patricia made a second call to an attorney in Nashville who represented Gerald Hartwell. I had not yet told Connor any of this. That was the hardest part. For 3 weeks, while Patricia coordinated with the prosecutor, while Dale finalized his report, while the Nashville attorney gathered his own documentation, I sat across from my son at dinner and watched him be happy and said nothing. I told myself it was to protect him. I told myself I was being strategic. But there were moments, driving home alone at night, when I wondered if I was making a mistake, if the evidence was enough, if I was wrong. I wasn't wrong. The moment of clarity came from an unexpected direction. Connor called me on a Thursday morning, and I could tell from his voice immediately that something had shifted. "Dad, I need to come over." He sat at my kitchen table with his phone in his hands, and his face the color of old ash. He'd been going through their shared laptop the night before, looking for a document Natalie had asked him to find. Instead, he'd found a folder. Inside the folder were screenshots of text messages between Natalie and Derek Crane, and a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet had columns for the business accounts, estimated balances, and a projected timeline. The most recent entry in the timeline column read, "After signing 60 days, Connor set his phone on the table and looked at me. He was 28 years old, and he looked, in that moment, about 15. "You knew," he said. It wasn't an accusation. His voice was very quiet. "I suspected. I've been gathering proof." He didn't say anything for a long time. Outside the window, the dogwood tree in the yard was in full bloom, the one Carol had planted the year Connor was born. "How long?" he asked finally. "Since April." He put his head in his hands. I let him sit there. I didn't try to fix it immediately or fill the silence with comfort. Sometimes you just have to let a person feel the full weight of something before you can help them carry it. After a while, he looked up. What do we do? We finish what I started. And then, it's over. The prosecutor's office moved the following week. They'd been thorough. Patricia had made sure of that. The documents Natalie had signed gave them a clear picture of intent. And with Dale's investigation, the Nashville attorney's files on Gerald Hartwell, and Connor's laptop folder, the pattern was undeniable. The arrest happened on a Tuesday. I wasn't there this time. I decided that wasn't what I needed. Connor didn't want to be there either. We were together at the hardware store, the original location on Main Street, the one my grandfather opened in 1951. We were walking the floor like we used to when Connor was small, and I'd bring him in on Saturday mornings. Patricia called me while we were standing in the lumber section. It's done, she said. She's in custody. Derek Crane was brought in for questioning in Nashville. The Hartwell attorneys are filing civil charges simultaneously. I thanked her and hung up. Connor was looking at a display of hand tools that hadn't changed much since his grandfather stocked it. It's over, I said. He nodded slowly. He reached out and straightened a hammer on the display rack that was hanging slightly crooked. Then he said, Did she ever actually care about me at all? Even a little? That question nearly broke me. I thought about it honestly, because he deserved honesty, not comfort. I don't know, I said. I don't think it matters now. What matters is that you're standing here, and the business is standing here, and we're going to be all right. He looked at me for a moment, and something in his face reminded me so sharply of Carol that I had to look away. The legal process took 6 months. Natalie's attorney argued that the partnership document was a setup, which was partially true and completely irrelevant. The document was legal. The opportunity was genuine, and she had signed it with full knowledge and returned it with a plan. The prosecutor had the text messages, the spreadsheet, the testimony of Gerald Hartwell's attorney, and a statement from one of Natalie's former business contacts who had a separate story of his own. She pled guilty 2 weeks before trial was scheduled to begin. Fraud, conspiracy, and theft by deception. She was sentenced to 4 years and ordered to pay restitution to Gerald Hartwell. The civil case in Nashville was still pending at sentencing, and her attorney indicated she'd likely owe substantially more before it was finished. When the sentence was announced, Patricia called me right away. I was at home, sitting in my study with a cup of coffee. 4 years, she said. Restitution. She'll likely serve 2 to 3. Thank you, Patricia. For everything. Robert, she said. What you did took patience. Most people in your situation act on emotion. You didn't. It made all the difference. I thought about that after I hung up, whether I'd done the right thing, and whether the right thing was worth what it cost. Connor had lost a fiancée he'd loved, or thought he'd loved. He'd lost 2 years of a relationship he'd believed in. That was a real loss, regardless of who Natalie turned out to be. But here's what I know about loss. It comes for everyone. The question isn't whether it arrives. It's what you're holding when it does. Connor was holding a family, a business, a father who hadn't given up on him. He was standing on solid ground, even when the ground shook. 6 months after the sentencing, Connor and I drove up to Pine Mountain on a clear October Saturday. It was the trail where he'd proposed to Natalie, and I thought maybe he'd want to avoid it, but he suggested it himself. We hiked for 2 hours without saying much. The leaves were turning, gold and orange, and that deep red that only lasts about a week before it's gone. On the way back down, he said, I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't overheard them that night. I know. I would have married her. I would have signed over everything. I know that too. He was quiet for a moment. I was so angry at first. When I realized you'd been investigating for weeks without telling me, I felt, I don't know, like you didn't trust me. I trusted you completely, I said. I didn't trust her. There's a difference. He thought about that. I should have seen it. She was very good at what she does. She fooled a man a lot more experienced than you. Don't measure yourself against that. He stopped walking and looked out over the valley below. From up here, you could see all the way to the ridge on the far side, maybe 15 miles of trees and sky. She called me her hardware heir, he said. In those texts, I know, like I was just a thing to be acquired. I didn't say anything. Some things don't need a response. After a while, he started walking again. I fell into step beside him, and we went down the mountain together in the late afternoon light. That winter, Connor took on more responsibility at the business, not because I pushed him to, but because he wanted to. He spent 3 months working alongside the operations manager at the Pikeville location, learning the parts of the supply chain he'd never been fully involved in. He started talking about expanding into commercial contracts. He had ideas, real ones, the kind that come from someone who has decided to build something rather than just inherit it. In February, he came into my office and put a proposal on my desk. A 5th location, Hazard. Smaller footprint, focused on contractor supply. He'd done the market research himself. I read it twice. It was good. It was actually very good. When did you put this together? I asked. Couple months ago. Wasn't sure if it was the right time to bring it up. It's the right time. He sat down across from me. Outside the office window, the parking lot was half empty on a slow Tuesday morning, and a light snow was falling. Dad, he said, thank you for not telling me what you were doing until you were sure. I know that sounds strange, but if you'd come to me with a suspicion and no proof, I would have defended her. I would have cut you off. I know, and I would have lost everything. You would have been okay eventually, I said. You're tougher than you think. He shook his head slightly. Not without you. I've thought about that conversation a lot since then, about what it means to protect someone who doesn't want to be protected, who doesn't know they need it. There's no clean way to do it. You can only do what seems right with the information you have, and trust that the people you love will eventually understand your reasons, even if it takes them a while to get there. I never gloated. I never needed to. Natalie knew I had won, and I knew it, and that was enough. There's a lesson in all of this that I want to say clearly, because I think it matters. When someone tells you they love your family, watch what they do with that claim. Love is not a declaration. Love is a pattern of behavior over time. It shows up in small things, in inconvenient moments, in what a person does when no one is watching and they think the door is closed. Natalie thought the door was closed. It wasn't. I also want to say something about the men and women who do what Gerald Hartwell experienced, what my son nearly experienced. They are skilled. They study vulnerability the way a doctor studies anatomy. They know exactly where to press. They target grief and loneliness, and the particular hunger that comes from wanting to believe that good things can still happen to you. That's not a character flaw in the people they target. That's a human need. Don't let anyone shame you for having it. The Calloway Home Hardware 5th location opened in Hazard last September. Connor cut the ribbon himself. He gave a short speech about what the business meant to the family and what he hoped it would mean to the community. He was good at it. Calm and direct and real. I stood at the back of the small crowd, the same way I used to stand at the back of his school plays when he was little, so I could watch without being watched. He caught my eye near the end and gave me a nod. Just that. A nod between two people who've been through something together and come out the other side. I nodded back. Some things don't need more than that. Thank you for staying with me through this whole story. I know it was long, and I know it was heavy in places, but I hope it was worth your time. If it reminded you to trust your instincts, or to keep fighting for the people you love even when they push you away, then I'm glad I told it. God bless each one of you.